keep telling you, if the Jazz are going to win, depth is going to be the answer. And this shows it even more so. Plus, Thurl Bailey joins for the off-season interview series. It's all next on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan. Today, the Atheltic ranks positional by position. Where do the Jazz players rank? We'll talk about it and what it means for the Jazz season. And Thurl Bailey, the great one, stops by to join us and chat about all things going on with the Utah Jazz in our summer interview series. Thanks to Ben Anderson for last week's great interviews. If you haven't grabbed them already, I've created a playlist of it so you can kind of just jam through all of them if you want to. It's been really good. Tim Lacombe will join us next week on the show. 2 shows this week with Thurl, Tuesday and Thursday. I hope you had a great Labor Day. By the way, if you're young enough that you do not know who Jim Abbott is, I think today is like the 30th anniversary of Jim Abbott throwing a no-hitter. Go look it up. Super inspirational. Be great. All right, here is how the Athletic ranked the Jazz players by position. Now, we don't know who our starting point guard is. They seem to think it's Talen Horton-Tucker is our starting point guard. That would probably be with the insight of Tony Jones. And they ranked Talen Horton-Tucker as the 29th ranked starting point guard in the NBA. Feels low, but on the other end, like we don't know if it's Talen, if it's Colin, if it's Chris Dunn. I kind of get it. 29th feels like, come on, you got to be kidding me. Or if it's Keontae. But on the other end, part of me does kind of buy into this idea that, you know what, like we don't know who our starting point guard is. And if we don't know, then I can understand where they rank him there. And I don't think you're going to move him a great deal. So to me, it's a little bit of a cool. Let's just run through it for a second, and then we can discuss each by thing. Because I think what's interesting about this is something we've talked about all offseason, and I've talked about in a lot of these interview series, like, well, how are the Jazz going to win? And how much are the Jazz going to win? And this is probably my largest concern is I feel like in the opening 5 or 6 minutes of a game, we're going to be at a disadvantage. And then as we sub in Kelly Olynyk with some depth, and as we sub in Colin Sexton with some depth, and as we sub in Ochai Agbaji, and as we sub in, whomever, and Simone playing great right now, the Italian team actually just tipping off against the United States as I'm recording this show today, is, whoever it might be, that's where I feel like we're going to make inroads. Like we're going to have to survive the first 6 minutes of the game quarter, win the next 12, and then survive the last 6 minutes of the second quarter, and the same thing in the fourth quarter. That's honestly a lot of, there was some level, that's how I felt a year ago too. And then we came through and won all those close games in kind of an awesome fashion under the direction of Mike Conley. So, that feels at least similar. U.S., by the way, playing much better today on this whole thing. So when you look at us and we're Talen Horton-Tucker's 29th, Clarkson's 25th, Lowry's 6th, Colin 18, Kessler 21. If you go with the Athletics rankings, then at least what this is kind of contested my point. It's like, okay, that's fine, but Kelly Olynyk might be the best backup power forward. And then if John Collins is playing backup 5, maybe John Collins is the best backup center in the NBA when he slides into that position. And then, Colin Sexton's got to be one of the best shooting guards of the NBA off the bench. Like if Clarkson's 25th on shooting guard ranks and Collins our backup, he's got to be about like, well, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, Clarkson I think is a little bit better, but the other guys around Clarkson are, and it's interesting. I read Clarkson 25th had the same reaction to him not being in the top 100. Like you got to be kidding. Well, 23rd is Anthony Simons. Clarkson or Simons is interesting. 24th is Austin Reeves. Definitely a love affair going there. Devin Vassell is 26th. So I kind of feel like those are similar. I probably, frankly, would side on that. I think Jordan's above most of those guys, and Anthony Simons and Jordan are pretty similar. But if you're going to talk about what makes if you're going to talk about what makes Jordan so good, Anthony Simons has a lot of the same characteristics. Simons, now in his 5th year in the NBA, last year averaged 22 points, 2 rebounds, 4 assists, 44%, 38% from threes, much better shooter than Jordan. So suddenly, like, I look at Simons at 23, it's like, that doesn't feel as awful as what we're talking about. Devin Vassell, I think, is probably a player who has as big a breakout year this year as anyone when he suddenly plays with better players than he's been playing. And he also now moves into, I believe, his 4th year where he makes a jump. Well, he last year averaged 19 points, shot 9% from 3 and 44%. Suddenly, that put Jordan in between those two guys doesn't feel nearly as kind of offensive as maybe you would have. Lowry at 6th is a great compliment. The 5 guys ahead of Lowry at 6th are Jason Tatum, LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant, and Jimmy Butler. John Collins at 18, it's kind of a weird grouping. It doesn't feel like any of these guys are like John Collins at all. PJ Washington, Cam Johnson, Keegan Murray, Sadiq Bey. The guys up even further ahead are Jalen Williams and Aaron Gordon. I don't know that I think John Collins is better than Jalen Williams or Aaron Gordon. So they were at 14, 15. PJ Washington was at 16. Cam Johnson was at 17. Keegan Murray's at 18. Sadiq Bey's at 19 and 20. And John Collins is in the middle of that. Collins, again, great. Everything with John Collins involves upside of whether he can get his game back and his shooting back at where it once was. But this is another one where, it doesn't feel, you're not moving. 18 might feel wrong for John Collins. I don't think he's going above Aaron Gordon. And Aaron Gordon's sitting at 15. So, and then Walker at 21st is in this whole grouping of centers. And I think Walker can move past this. Gobert's 6, by the way, if anyone's wondering. Zubac, Wendell Carter Jr., Kayvon Looney, Yusuf Nurkic, Mitchell Robinson, Steven Adams. I do think Walker can vault past some of those kind of lumbering big Steven Adams, Zubac, Nurkic type bigs. But on the other end, there were times last year when Walker got manhandled physically just trying to learn the league. And those guys are probably past that. We love Walker and should love Walker and what he's done for the team in this growth possibility. But there are still pieces of this puzzle that need to learn. And I don't, I often say, I don't think the second year is usually a big jump for a player who had a very good first year. Walker's going to have a complete second year, which he didn't have last year. And he needs to shoot better than 51.6% from the free throw line would be kind of the biggest thing. And if you go to the final 41 games, I think that's, when Walker starting, you can look at that and say, okay, we'll get that. I don't know that we'll get a tremendous more than that in the sense that was a really good year. Like if Walker, I think from that point on averaged, I think 12 points and 11 rebounds a game, I'm and shot about 70%. So I'm not expecting, maybe he goes 14, 13, but not a massive jump there, just in the sense that you don't usually make that jump until year 3, a little bit longer down the road. So it's an interesting, it just backs up my feeling on the Jazz this year. The depth is everything for them. And I want your comments. If you're on YouTube, where do you agree or disagree with some of these guys? Think the Jazz players are ranked better than that. But to me, this is just, Chris Dunn, Colin Sexton, Keontae George, Kelly Olynyk, John Collins sliding into the 4 spot somewhere along the way. Whoever plays our backup 3, is it Ochai Agbaji? Is it Taylor Hendricks? Is it however they do it? To me, it's going to be really exciting that the middle 12 minutes of every game are going to be, I think, what turns it. And that's where we did our substitution patterns a few weeks ago. Your everydayers all remember. And that was the interesting one. Is like, how do you maximize that time? Do you circle Lowry back in 3 stints instead of in 2 so that you can get him in those minutes and those kind of things? So I would say I think this is just further kind of backs up my feeling that the way the Jazz are going to win games this year is with depth. And I also think this backs up my other thing is the league is just loaded. Like when Jordan Clarkson comes out at 25th on the shooting guards, and I'm like, what? And then I look at it and it's like Anthony Simons, Devin Vassell. Oh, oh, like some of those guys are pretty good. Like, I don't know who, if you kind of look at the shooting guards down the road, like I'm not sure who the guys are that I'm going to sit there and tell you. I think, depending on where you have them, Jaylen Brown's 2, Spencer Dinwiddie's 20, Quentin Grimes is 18. I feel like that one's a little much, but he's in New York, so always. Tyrese Maxey is great. Jaden Ivey is right in there. Donovan's number 1. Terry Rozier 15th. DeJounte Murray 7th. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope 17th. Anthony Edwards is 6th. Paul George is 3rd. Unless you're going to Herb Jones is 28th. Plays elite level defense. Unless you're going to blast Klay Thompson at this point with his legs. So pretty interesting to see across the board. Today's show is brought to you by my friends over at Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street, also located in Logan and in Linden. The Murdoch family's been in Utah for over 80 years, bringing you the great customer service and the no regrets approach. And the Hyundai cars are just outstanding. I'm driving the Ioniq 5 right now because my daughter is off to college. So I got my car back and loving it. We also have the new Santa Fe, a little sporty, fun Santa Fe that we're driving. We're a Hyundai house. Why? Because when I did the research, I got the more bang for the buck. The cars are great. I got more dollars for what I spent. I got all the safety features. I maxed out on safety features. And if you look at the Ioniq 5, it's the Motor Trend SUV of the year. The Ioniq 6 is the car of the year. Hyundai's making incredible cars at a great price with a great people in the Murdochs being able to hold it together. Murdochs are an easy one to support. Got a great email yesterday from someone who just had a super experience over there and actually did it without my call. They just wanted to let me know that they went over there without me setting it up for them and got incredible treatment. But I will set it up for you. So feel free to email me first at dlock09@gmail.com. Today's show is also brought to you by Intercap Lending. Speaking of amazing customer service, Intercap Lending and Steve Carter do amazing work over Intercap. Crazy time right now to get a loan, trust me. And so right now, the way you need someone like Steve Carter who can really navigate the system for you. Intercap does a great job with being they're flexible, borrow experience. They keep that relationship. And then Steve Carter is simply the best. Steve Carter at 385-800-8528 is the best customer service I can give you. He's done our COOs. He's done 2 of mine. Everybody who's been to Locked On has had the same reaction. Dave Thurman said, all I can say about Steve Carter is by far the best loan officer I've ever worked with her. And that's said because I've worked with my fair share. He's responsive, down to earth, which is rare. I'll be sure to recommend him to anyone in the highest praise. Clayton and Sarah said, Steve Carter, Intercap, did a fantastic job with the refi. The process was seamless and quick. We reached out in a time crunch, and he really made it happen. You can email me at dlock09@gmail.com, and I'll set you up. Or call Steve Carter at 385-800-8528. Intercap Lending, NMLS number 190465. And today's show is brought to you by Birddogs. Visit birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA or use the promo code LockedOnNBA. And Birddogs, there's just nothing more comfortable. I've got 3 pair now that Birddog has been wonderful enough to send me. 2 pair that Birddog sent me, I guess, and 1 pair that I purchased myself. And they are the go-to shorts. Like when it's time for just something a little bit more comfortable, they have figured it out. These companies, it's all great, have figured it out a little bit. The old stiff cotton short that kind of fits, doesn't fit. Nope, that's not going to work anymore. They make you look good. The stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit a slimmer through the thigh and legs to give you a little more sculpted look. The shorts are the exact same as Lulu, frankly, but they fit way better. The inner linings are great. And the anti-stink sweat wicking fabric keeps you cool and dry all day long. Birddogs are functional. Golf, date, evening, workout, pool. That's also what I love about them. It's kind of how I've mixed and matched. I literally played golf in them and jumped in the pool in the same day in the same Birddog shorts. Go do it. Birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA. Enter the promo code LockedOnNBA to get your free Birddogs water bottle with your order. That's Birddogs/LockedOnNBA for a free water bottle at checkout. You don't want to take your Birddogs off, I promise you. The great Thurl Bailey joins us next. He's the best. He's an NBA star. He's an author. He's a public speaker. He's a dad. He's a husband.
Grandpa.
He's a grandpa. He's Thurl Bailey. He's my favorite. Don't tell Ron I said that. But Ron doesn't watch Locked On Jazz very often, so I think we're okay.
Ron's healing up anyway.
That's right. All right, Big T. Let's talk some basketball. We're getting kind of close. We get the honor of supporting Maui in our opening preseason game, which is a wonderful event. Are you, as you look at the Jazz roster today, assuming it holds, are you surprised at all that this is where the Jazz are and this is the roster?
I think there's always some surprises in there, D. I mean, I don't really go into it with any preconceived opinions, if you will. I have my opinions of maybe what they need, what they don't need, who might be staying, who might be going, who will opt out, who will stay. So there was some surprises there because I think there are a few guys who basically showed who they really are by committing to the Jazz and understanding what potentially they have here when they probably could be in other places with a bigger role. But I like the fact that we didn't do much shopping, right? I mean, asset-wise, we were in good position with our picks. Jazz, for the most part, I think got what they wanted. What was they were hoping would be available for them was that point guard position. We both know it's a vital position to be successful. Not that guy has to take on the load, but there's always got to be a guy who can, even if you're playing point guard by committee, there's got to be a guy who can be an impact player in that position. Now, whether Keontae George can make that mark right away, I think he's shown that it's possible that he can.
Being a rookie's hard.
It is.
Really, really, really hard. So I'm assuming you're talking a little bit about Jordan and the fact that Jordan committed and then signed. How important do you think that is to the franchise? I
think it's huge. There's no question he's, with the emergence of Lauri Markkanen, I think it might be a toss-up between, fan favorites. But Jordan Clarkson will always be a big fan favorite here. And I think part of it is this is the place that really has been behind him, good or bad. Take him as he comes, right? His style of basketball play for Quinn Snyder to really give him kind of that freedom. And I know Coach Hardy runs a little bit different offense, or maybe a lot different offense. But I think Jordan really enjoys being in Utah. He's got other things that he does, but his home base doesn't affect those things. I think it makes it better. And so I'm really, really glad that he opted in to stay.
You mentioned Will Hardy. It's funny to think a year from now, we probably did this conversation, and that was the biggest unknown of the whole season. Yeah. We actually thought we knew they're not going to be very good, but what we really didn't know was Will Hardy. So before we look ahead to what Will Hardy year 2 is going to be, let's go back to Will Hardy year 1. What jumped out to you about the Jazz head coach in his first year?
I think the first thing that jumped out to me, because, you mentioned one of the things that I do is, I'm a public speaker. I'm big on communication, D. Really am. I'm big on, that one-on-one communication, group communication, getting everybody on the same page, building teams, and speaking to every individual on that team and getting to know their personalities, and then putting all that together to say, well, what's this team going to look like? So I thought, first of all, Will Hardy, I think, even talked about it as he came in, about the guys he talked to. And I remember, with Mike Conley being here, he basically said, look, I can't teach Mike Conley anything. I'm learning from him. So a guy who can understand the balance between communicating and being on a level with these guys that they can trust them, but also knowing you're the coach. So you got to put the hammer down sometimes, and guys aren't going to like it. So I really saw that early on. But I did see some, nervousness, hoping that, I can get this thing right, which is natural, right? But I think overall his knowledge and his ability to take all the things that he's learned and then make it his own on this team, put his own brand on this team. I thought we saw it come out quickly in this team. So I really like the fact that he's a great communicator. You could tell he loves basketball. We'd be sitting, I remember on the road somewhere, I can't remember where it was. The Jazz were in a tight game. It may have been Indiana. But he walked up to the table, and I kind of looked up, and I think they were down It was a close game, but he looked at me and smiled, and he kind of winked like, I love this stuff, right? And so that told me a lot about him right there. And then from then on, I would just ask him, wins or losses, coach, still having fun? He said, yeah, you're damn right I am. And so it's really refreshing to see a guy come in his first year and kind of be pleasantly surprised himself, right, at what these guys have bought into and created. So that's why I'm really excited for this year.
You reminded me of a bunch of stories there. The one that maybe is most pertinent was in Atlanta in the locker room. We're on the road early in the year, if I remember correctly, because Nate's still the head coach. And Will's walking through the locker room going, fun's underrated in the NBA. Fun is underrated in the NBA. Let's have some fun. It's underrated in the NBA. And it was kind of an eye-opener. That was kind of his mantra there for a long time, was to try to make sure that that everyone's having fun. And I thought that was an interesting kind of approach by him in regards to that.
Well, if there is a problem with that, now it's that year's over. That season's gone.
How do you do that again, right? Yeah.
How do you do it again when everybody now knows you're not a surprise, right? It's like, okay, these guys, they don't mess around. Okay, we underrated them coming into the season. We're not going to do that again. We know what Lowry Marketing was and can be. So there's a bit of a bullseye, there's a bit of a target. I mean, Jazz haven't really achieved anything yet in the new regime, but I think we saw some previews of really how good they can be if they can stay consistent and healthy, obviously. But that's what I'm looking toward. I'm looking to see how Coach Hardy approaches this year, because now, once that year's over, you're not a rookie anymore.
Year 2 with Will Hardy will be our conversation as we continue with Thurl Bailey here on Locked On Jazz. College football fans, pro football fans, the Locked On previews are out. They're exceptional. By conference in college football and the NFL extravaganza. The hosts get into it. The little fighting, little bickering, little P&V back and forth between the hosts. You got to love it. It's all available. Locked On NFL previews for you for the NFL season as well as the NBA season. So, Thurl, as we continue, you talk about it. Year 2 is different, right? Like, what is like? And I always say this about the NBA. I understand why general managers want continuity, but I actually don't think there's anything that exists in continuity. Season ends, and really, honestly, what happens is season ends, guys go home, guys get around their guys listen to their guys work on their games, guys get told how great they are by their guys, and guys come back in a different contract year, in a different position, and in a different view of who they are than when the year ended. And it has to be all remolded every single year. And often, this team doesn't have it, but if you think back at some of the last teams we've had, with scars from last year. We don't have those. That's the good news. We don't have scars from last year. That was a pretty peachy keen good year. But it is different. Colin Sexton, Tony Jones was like, I'm a starter. I'm back healthy. I'm ready, and I'm a starter. Oh, are you? Like, because we have some other guys. And Ochai Abaji's in year 2. He's not the same guy in expectations of himself as he was. And Jordan just signed a 3-year contract. Like, things are different. So how does this team gel in year 2? Like, Team 49 is done. This is Team 50.
Yeah, well, honestly, I think every team has scars. It just depends on how deep that cut is.
Okay,
like the good part is it never leaves the locker room, right? Or it's never expressed. If I have a problem as a player with my playing time or whatever, I direct that. I go directly to the source, the coach, and ask what I need to do, or whatever that opinion is. But no team is perfect. No team is. There's not a team where everybody's happy, D. Now, there's degrees of that. And I think that you're right in the fact that we have a set of guys on this team that understand the culture, right? They understand that if they break that culture, break that trust, they're not going to have guys that are going to follow them in that, right? And, if you're not playing well and you get subbed out early, you get moved to the bench or whatever, that's a part of it, right? That's a part of how hard you've worked in the offseason. That's a part of what did we talk about in our exit interviews, that we feel like if you bring this back, we're going to be a better team. And so you're right, though. I mean, you go home and people tell you how good you are and how many more minutes you should be playing. And let's add this to your game because we think you're good at it. And you're not a great ball handler, really. But you get back here and none of that stuff is really needed. This is what we need from you. Take Talen Horton-Tucker, for instance. I think he's a really good example of a guy who actually learned on the fly how to be a better player during the season. I mean, he was equipped with things, but he was never in a position like he was in this past year when guys were hurt and out to be asked to play primarily a point guard and try to facilitate. He wasn't a good facilitator early on. He's not a great one now, but he's better. He understands what is needed of him now, and it's not that three-point shot you're going to rely on. It's you putting your head down and getting to the hoop and knocking people down on the way, and then being good enough to know when you don't have it where everybody is. I think he's due for a really, really good season, and a lot of that's up to him.
22 years old.
I know. We always say that, right? We always mention his age when we're talking about him excitedly, and I just think that he's got something that's unusual that's going to come in handy for this team.
Is he the player you're most intrigued by this year?
Most intrigued by based on last year?
Yeah, like if you look at our roster, like who's the guy that you're looking at? Like, okay, that's the one I really like. Let's see what he's got. Like, we're gonna find out what he's got.
I think I know.
Oh, interesting.
I think I know what he's got and capable of. Now,
and take me there. What is that?
I think he's got the ability. You've got the ability to really put the ball. Now, I still believe that we're going to have 4 or 5 guys, maybe more, who can bring the ball down, who can start the transition. Right? I think he can be a really good at that. Jazz are looking to get that early shot in the shot clock. And if you need something going to the basket, and it remains to be seen how consistent he can be, not turning the ball over in those situations. But I like his pace. I really do. And I think that if he's working on anything, he's working on his ability to shoot from deep and be consistent with it. I think last year sometimes he started early with that shot. And I always think he's better when he sees it go in and he's kind of in a groove, and he can knock that down because he's rolling, right? He's rolling. And so, but if you ask me about a guy who I think is going to be intriguing, I think it's John Collins.
Oh, interesting.
One
note on Talen, 16th percentile in rim finishing.
Yeah.
Like, that's the one. Like, we can talk. All right, I got it. His 3-point shooting's in the 11th percentile, but it's been there for 3 years.
Right.
Like, that's just it. But his rim percentage is got to be better than 54.5%. If he can get that up to 60%, so that's 2 more buckets. That's a bucket or 2 a game going to the free throw line. Like, that's the game changer on Talen. That if he can start figuring out how to finish at the rim with that size and strength, it changes. Okay, John Collins.
Yeah, I like when you throw those numbers in there while we're talking.
I thought you might.
I love it.
You might be worried if I wasn't doing that.
I would be.
Okay.
And I say that because there's, a question mark about how he fits in. I think he's got the tools to play multiple positions. I think he can be an offensive-minded guy. I think he can be a guy that even defensively can with that his size. I mean, Jazz are still going to be huge on the court. But some of this for me is where you're coming from, right? I mean, you didn't leave Atlanta on good terms, really. I mean, right? I mean, and so now this could be a place for you to kind of hit the refresh button, the reset button, and come into a great culture and contribute. So I know he can play, but sometimes you got to be in the right place to really show what you can do, and you got to be committed to doing what's needed. So I'm really excited to watch him because I think he's a great piece. He could be a really great piece for the squad.
Trae Young is a brilliant player. He's incredible. but John Collins had to play as Trae Young needed him to play. John Collins gets to play maybe as John Collins needs to play in Utah. That's the hope, at least.
That is the hope. That is the hope. And I think when you look at the mindset of our coaching staff and how they've kind of integrated these different characters of players, because honestly, I still believe that Lauri Markkanen didn't know he was a star when he got here, right? He had to be told by the team and the coach, come on, dude, you're the guy. And once you got that green light, and once you went out there and you stretched up over somebody and you just hammered it down on him, you're like, okay, I am the guy. Now, you never say that out loud, but that's the kind of swagger that he has. So in saying that, you also mix in other guys like Jordan Clarkson, for instance. We know what his game is, right? We call him the magician. He's heavy on the ball handling. He can get inside. I think he's becoming a better decision maker in there. Maybe not as consistent as the Jazz want him. He's that early shot taker on the break from three. And he's getting better at finding guys if he's in trouble. But I make that point because there's so many different guys that Coach Hardy has to work into his system, from Kelly Olynyk to, all these guys. And I think a guy like John Collins can come in and Coach can find a really good way to get him integrated. You got to play D, but I think we can, put you in a position where you can thrive.
He's Thurl Bailey. He'll be back with us tomorrow. It's Locked On Jazz, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll be back with you tomorrow with Thurl Bailey, part 2 of the interview as we continue the offseason interview series here on Locked On Jazz.